Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Bible and Life podcast. I am so grateful to you that you're part of the Bible and Life family and that you're joining me on the show on this particular episode. Got a special episode planned for today. Got a special guest on the show. We don't typically have guests, but it really seemed fitting for the current series we're in to invite this friend of mine, Brad Gray, to be on the show. But before we jump into that interview, I just wanted to give this word of encouragement to you in the midst of all the disruption and all the frustration and all the confusion that the coronavirus has caused at this present time. I wanted to encourage you maybe to take some time, open up your Bible to Psalm 131, and just sit and prayerfully read through Psalm 131. It's been encouraging to me. I think it might be encouraging to you. It uses this beautiful image of a child who is completely at peace and at rest, all nestled in on its mother's chest, and completely contented. And then it calls God's people to put their hope in God. And I just think that's a beautiful picture. There's a lot we don't understand. There's a lot we don't know about the future. There's frustrations about the present. There's questions that we want to get answered, and we just don't understand it all. And yet, in the midst of that, Psalm 131 says, "Put your hope in the Lord. Rest in Him like a weaned child, nestled contentedly and at peace on uh, his or her mother's chest." And so just settle your soul down, be still before the Lord, know that He's in charge, He's got this, and put your hope in the Lord. So I wanted to offer that word of encouragement to you today as we begin, just because this current season of life we're in with the coronavirus has brought so much uncertainty, so much angst, so much disruption, and for some people, so much suffering and heartache. So trust in the Lord, be still before Him. He's got you and He's got this. Also, if you're stuck at home and you're got more time on your hands and you're looking for some additional resources, in addition to the podcast, I've got some online courses on my website at johnwhitaker.net that might be a great way to spend some of your days right now while you're quarantined at home, stuck at home, self-isolating at home, whatever phrase we want to use for that, and you got a little more time and you're tired of binging on Hulu or Netflix, I've got some online courses on there that'll help you grow in your faith, grow in your walk with God, learn how to follow Jesus. So you can check those out at johnwhitaker.net/courses. I'll have the link to that down in the notes below. All right, on this episode, I have invited a friend of mine by the name of Brad Gray to come onto the show. Brad is the creator at walkingthetext.com. And the whole heart of that ministry is to help people like you and me learn, love, and live the Bible. And in a very real sense, it's very much similar to the heart of what we're trying to do here on the Bible and Life podcast. And so Brad and I have connected over the last year, gotten to know each other just a little bit. And in view of the questions that we've been wrestling with in the current series and how we are seeking to address some of the frustrations, confusions, and difficulties we have with the Bible, I thought Brad would be a great resource to just help us think about the original context and what it looks like to read the Bible in the original context and how that helps maybe clear up some of our confusions or our frustrations, how that helps bring the Bible to life for us and make it three-dimensional. And so super excited to have Brad on the show today. And this is part one of two. And on this part, Brad is going to really talk about the power of the original context and give some examples of how that affects our understanding of the text so that we can read the Bible better and really understand what it's all about. So take a listen to Brad and I discuss the power of the original context. Well, Brad, thanks for joining me on the Bible and Life podcast. I'm so glad you're taking your time to be on the show with me. And most of my listeners, there's probably a few that maybe have listened to some of your YouTube videos or even your podcast version of that, but a lot of them probably don't know you. So why don't you take a second and just introduce yourself to my listeners here?
Yeah, well, John, thanks so much for having me on the show. So yeah, I get the joy of living in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been here now for a few years, originally from West Michigan. And I've got four kids, so 12, 10, 8, and 5, 3 boys and a girl, which is fantastic. So for me, home life is a foundational piece to anything and everything that I do. So my wife, Shallon, and I have been married now for 16 years, and it's a great joy to just be able to have a family and be able to just have that facet of recognizing that your kids teach you more than than most anybody else, and
Yeah.
challenge you and push you and all of that. So yeah, so that is as far as like family life, home life, and all of that. And then just over 2 years ago, I started a crowdfunded nonprofit organization called Walking the Text out of the ministry work that I've been doing. So I've been teaching the Bible for more than 15 years now, as a teaching pastor for more than a decade. And when God moved us to the Nashville area, we just kind of sat back and said, okay, God's moved us here, and what are we going to be jumping into? And so, Walking the Text, formalized 2 years ago, was basically everything that I do from a faith based perspective that is under one umbrella. So, right now, there are kind of three main facets to Walking the Text. I get to lead these 2 week biblical study hiking trips to Israel and Turkey, and just getting into my 11th year of actually doing that. And then, secondly, we have twice a month, we send out a roughly a 20-minute teaching on the Bible that is both available as a video as well as a podcast. And then, kind of the third facet of what we do is I get the great privilege and joy of speaking at churches and conferences. And ultimately, what we do as an organization, what we're kind of centering ourselves around, is helping people understand the Bible in its original context.
Yeah.
So, in my 15 years of teaching the Bible and growing up in the church, everybody knows that in any facet of life, context is everything. And yet, the vast majority of people have never been taught how to think about context related to the Bible. And so we just saw that as a massive need. So many people struggle to understand what the Bible is saying. For some, it's just difficult. It's frustrating. Maybe for others, they feel like the Bible is old and irrelevant and outdated. And when you set the Bible, when you set the text in its ancient context, it is as relevant as it is today as it was, 2, 3 thousand years ago. So we're just trying to help create resources for people to learn, love, and live out the Bible every day by understanding its original context.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure your travels to Israel and all that just kind of help. I mean, they put flesh on the bones, bring it to life, make it three-dimensional so that you're able to use a lot of that even in your teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting the joy of, whenever I teach, I love to be very visual. Hence, we do the video teaching so that we can show video clips of the land, we can show pictures, but nothing beats standing in the location and being able to say to your group, "It's right here."
Yeah.
you know, here's
Yeah.
here's here's where the story took place, and now let's unpack the story where it actually unfolded. And yeah, it's a great joy to be able to do that.
Yeah. With that emphasis on teaching the Bible in the original context, I mean, just the impact of that. Do you have like maybe an example or two of like, here's the impact of what really understanding the Bible in its original context?
Yeah, I mean, even look at something like uh, the life of Jesus, and just how you've got Matthew and Luke who are tackling birth narratives, connected to Jesus, and just even what they're both focusing and emphasizing. So for example, for Luke, to start off and to say, in the days of Caesar Augustus, that's all he says. And to anybody in the first century world, that would be the equivalent for us hearing uh, in the days of Pearl Harbor, in the days of the Holocaust, in the days of 9/11, in the days of, Donald Trump.
Right.
Regardless of what you think about those, we all hear Pearl Harbor, Holocaust, 9/11, Trump. We don't There's no other context that we need to be given, because we understand how electric, how explosive, how tension filled that phrase is. And to anybody in the first century, to hear the name Caesar Augustus would have triggered the same response. And Luke is not writing going, 2,000 years later, a guy by the name of Brad and John are going to be talking about my work on a podcast.
Right.
So they're writing to their audience, assuming that their audience knows what they know, lives in the world that they live in. And to anybody who knows anything about the Roman Empire, hearing the word Caesar Augustus would have triggered, oh, Caesar Augustus started ruling in 27 BC. He's on the throne for nearly half of Jesus's life, and more than half of Jesus's life. And in the Roman context, in the Roman world, Caesar Augustus, long before Jesus shows up on the scene, is being touted as a divine son of God who has been made king in order to bring peace and prosperity to the entire world. He's got a good news. It's the word euangelion, the exact same word that the Gospels use to talk about Jesus. And even poets talk about that this is coming through the remission of sins. And so to talk about a divine Son of God who comes to bring a gospel of peace and prosperity for all of humanity through the remission of sins, however they understood that, it's in their literature. Caesar Augustus is ruling the world. And it's at that moment that God goes, yeah, now is the time for Jesus to be birthed onto the scene. And to be able for Luke to say, in the days of Caesar Augustus, you are immediately thrown into a clash of cultures, a clash of kingdoms. Rome functions one way, they're ruling the world, and Jesus is on the scene to bring an entirely different approach to kingdom, upside down kingdom, clash it with Rome that's going to allow him or eventually lead him to a cross where he is executed on a Roman torture symbol. And all Luke has to do is say, in the days of Caesar Augustus.
And it triggers all of that for everybody.
It's all there. It's
Right.
all there.
Yeah. I know when I was teaching at the Bible college, one of the things I always told, particularly my Acts class, because so much history in the book of Acts, is my goal in going through the book of Acts is to make this three-dimensional for you, for the world of the Bible to come to life and for it to pop off the page. And you realize these are real people with real hopes and fears and expectations and real struggles and difficulties. And so often I think a casual reading, a just popular level casual reading of the Bible, we miss that. And the Bible just as words on paper, and we're hoping in some way it applies to our life, but we don't have the whole context. We don't have the whole story,
Right. Yep. And part of what we have to be reminded too is that when the writers actually wrote what they wrote, they didn't want to fill up space with what everybody already knew. They had limited space. They didn't have a digital, processor where they could write 50,000 words and, format it however they wanted. They were limited, by the scrolls, the parchments that they're working with. And so whatever they're recording, it's supposed to shock the audience. It's supposed to challenge the audience. It's supposed to make them pause and wrestle with it, because all of the stuff that they already knew, they're not going to waste time putting on. They're going to put on those things that are going to force them to go, oh, well, that's unexpected. What are the implications of that?
Yeah. What about like maybe even Bible difficulties or Bible confusions? How does the original context maybe even clear up some of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, if you begin to understand, just some of the basic facets of context. So take, for example, a passage like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. It's people's life verses. It's used if people want to, win the championship, get $1 million, overcome cancer. They're going through a difficulty, and it's like, well, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And for many people, they get into those experiences and things don't turn out the way that they thought they would or what they believed God would do. And they go, but God made a promise, and I'm not experiencing that. And it creates this dissonance. It creates this frustration. And when you look at that, the context for Philippians 4 is actually relatively simple. You got to read the 4 previous verses, and you just have to know that Paul's in prison. And just those 2 pieces together, you read that and you go, Paul is talking about contentment despite whatever circumstances he's going through. whether he has plenty or whether he is in want, whether he is naked and beat up on the side of the road, or he's sitting in a wealthy, home enjoying a lavish meal. He is saying, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. And that is that when he is living out God's will and God's way in his life, whether he's experiencing the highest of highs or the lowest of lows, he can get through it because Jesus is his strength.
Yeah.
And he's in prison writing this, And so oftentimes what I have found for people is that, when they open up the Bible, they want immediate results. We're an immediate culture. Everything is instant coffee, instant weather report, Instagram. We are instant in everything. And so what that drives us to do is that when we open up the Bible, the first question that we're often asking is, well, what does this mean for me? Rather than first asking the question, what did it mean for them then?
Right.
And because we try to rush in to get this like spiritual kick in order to then, run off to the rest of our day, we fail to recognize why it was even written in the first place, which means then our interpretive method is to come to the Bible through our 21st century Western lens. And whatever religious experiences we've had in our lifetime is what we're looking at the Bible through, rather than asking the Bible, why were you even given in the first place? Why was this written? What did it mean for them then? And when you can just fill in just some of those gaps, the understanding then for, okay, this is what this can mean for me, is you ask better questions. There are deeper implications. It's more of a faithful understanding of what the Bible is trying to say. And you don't start trying to build your theology on what you think are promises, when in fact it might be something that's very different.
Yeah.
And so just for people just to sit back and you just even say, okay, have you ever been quoted out of context? We all have. Nobody likes that, right? Because you're always like, no, but you missed this. You didn't include that. And so often I think the Bible is going, exactly.
Can you imagine sitting down with Peter or Paul or John on the new earth? And it's like, but Pat, you've totally misrepresented what I was trying to say. You took me totally out of context. I mean,
exactly.
Uncomfortable, awkward moment there with one of the apostles, we wouldn't want that. So.
Yeah. And it just goes to and that's for some people who find the Bible just difficult or frustrating to read because they just don't, they don't understand. But also this is a big conversation for people who want to talk about the irrelevancy of the Bible, or it's old, archaic, it's outdated. When you set it in its context and you realize at that point in human history how God was moving, and I mean, it is revolutionary. The entire Bible from beginning to end is pushing the envelope. It is revolutionary. It is explosive. It's redemptive. It's challenging the cultures of the day. It's responding to what was happening for real people in a real place in a real time. And the more that we're able to understand what that world was like, the more we'll be able to understand what is actually being said in Scripture and how it connects for us in our lives today.
Yeah. But that's a whole lot more work than just sitting down and reading in 5 minutes and getting your spiritual kick and ready to go. I mean, that's a whole lot more work. And
it is. But here's what I've found is that, when it comes to people reading the Bible and getting into it, one of the things that I love to remind people of is this is not about sitting down for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. It is about consistency. It is about getting in. It's about learning some key pieces to how the Bible is operating, handles, foundation pieces, signposts for you, so that when you get down to reading, you're able to pick up on things and you're able to see, oh, that's what's being played out there. And, there's a lot of really great resources out there. And that's one of the things too, that I don't feel like that there has been a more exciting time in human history to teach the Bible than today. I mean, we have more resources. We know more from, excuse me, archaeology, Dead Sea Scrolls, just what we know from, literary evidence, and so many accessible resources have been created that anybody can read. I mean, anybody who's listening to this right now can pick up, tons of resources that have been created even in the last 10 years, 15 years, that provides that context, that gives that history, or gives that cultural background, or gives this connection to the Egyptian world or to the Roman world that the writers are interacting with, so that you can read it in a way where you go, oh yeah, it makes total sense why, Paul would write that, or why Luke would include Jesus's teaching, about that. Or and that's part of what makes it fun, is that it is additional work. But what I have found, when people who, whether they've been familiar with the Bible, been a part of the church for a long time, or just checking it out, is that when you see the text in context, your soul begins to soar. You see things that you go, of course. And it creates this adventurous feel within you to go, man, when I open up the Bible, the last thing I want it to do is ever feel like a chore. I want to open up the Bible and I want to go on an adventure. I want to understand what is going on, and I want to see, how does this apply to my life? And as I apply it and experience the transformational power of the Holy Spirit working through me, it just gets you, it drives you, encourages you, compels you to get back into God's word on a regular basis, to see what more you can find
Yeah.
that will change your life.
Yeah. And, I was thinking of the Center for Bible Engagement. Are you familiar with the Center for Bible Engagement?
No, I am not. You know
Yeah.
what? Actually, no, I am. I have heard about them.
Yeah. The Center for Bible Engagement. Very interesting. Their first major study is about 8 years ago, 2012. But what they discovered was, if a person engages with the text of the Bible, either in like a small group or a sermon or on their own, 1 day a week, no measurable effect on their life. 2 days a week, no measurable effect. 3 days a week, little blip. But 4
Yep.
days a week or more, and massive change in their life. That they've however those surveys and all those work, they've statistically just shown, like, people that engage with the Bible 4 days a week, massive drop in anger issues, loneliness, depression, and other pornography use, all these things, 4 days a week, which is more often than not, which makes sense.
Right.
I've been advocating that for 20 years without the benefit of
Sure.
modern
Research. Yeah.
statistical studies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you work out physically 4 days a week, more often than not, you're gonna be
Totally.
in better shape, right? But it's getting into the Bible and engaging with it regularly that I think is really hard for people. And then when people jump into the text of Scripture, they read it and it's like, it makes no sense. They're
Right.
confused by it. I mean, we just have to be willing to recognize this is a book, not it's written for us, but it's not written to us. And
Yeah.
it's not written about us. It's
Right.
there's another world out there, and that just is going to take a little effort. When I taught Acts again at the Bible college, I always had the students, before, between the first day of class and the second day of class, there was a day in between. So they had about 2 days to do this, read the whole book of Acts. And I had 3 questions I'd have them answer. And one of them was, what would have really helped you understand what you were reading? Every year, most of the students would say, if I just knew where these places were.
Yeah.
I mean, if I just had
Exactly.
a map that told me
Right.
where that would have
Exactly.
just in and of itself, just a map. But it's like, so let's just be honest. We just need that stuff, right? We need background. We need a little history. The book is written in history, it's grounded in there. So
Yeah.
and it is a little more work. It's a little more work, but like you said, it brings it to life. It makes it more engaging. It makes it more exciting. We all of a sudden we're reading something that's real and rooted in the real world, and then it has a greater power to impact us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually one of the things that a couple of years ago we did is, for you've been teaching the Bible for 20, 25 years plus. I've been doing it for 15. And one of the questions, especially when I take people on these, 2-week experiences to the Middle East, was they would experience the text in context. But the question then we kept getting asked was, okay, I know context is everything. I know that maps are important. I understand, but how do I do this? I mean, it's one thing to be moved by context, to see why it changes your reading of the text, and sometimes it fundamentally changes it, sometimes it just really enhances and deepens it. And so one of the things that we did a couple of years ago at the launch of Walking the Text is that we created a free resource called The Number One Mistake Most Everyone Makes Reading the Bible. And it's just a short 30-page ebook that people can download at walkingthetext.com. But what it does is it starts off and it makes a case for context. So it helps us to see why we haven't read the Bible in context and what's been the experience for most people. And then what we do is we offer a framework. So when people are going, okay, if I need to read the text in context, how do I do that? And that framework has 6 different lenses that helps us to understand what those are. So there's history, there's geography, there's cultural backgrounds, there's visual settings, there is literary design, and there is the linguistics, the language. And for each of those 6 lenses, we just do, a paragraph that defines what's involved in that lens, offer up a few examples from the Bible so they can see how that lens is being played out, and then here are the 4 or 5 key questions you should be asking the Bible when you're studying it in order to understand the context through this lens. And then we offer typically anywhere from like 3 to 5 resources that are very accessible that people can purchase in order to grow in their understanding of that. And what we have found is that when anybody comes to Walking the Text, that's the first thing we want to give them is, here, read this. Understand what it is about context, because if this is something that makes sense to you, if this is something that you want to better understand the Bible, we want to give you a tool, we want to give you a framework that will help you do that effectively, so that you're not just going, oh, okay, well, I know context matters, but just not having a clarified framework going forward in order to be able to do that well.
Yeah. And that's so important, just the framework and the resources, the tools that are available.
Yeah, because there's
much
so many. And some you buy and some are free. But man, we have more resources available to us today to help us to understand the Bible than ever before. And it's really, really exciting.
That's great.
Well, that is part 1 of Brad and I's conversation about reading the Bible, grasping the Bible, digging deep into the Bible so that it can shape our life. We will tackle some more specific questions, some questions that some of our listeners have asked on social media about the Bible next week on the show. So be sure to tune in next week for the rest of our conversation. We'll dig into Leviticus and struggles with really understanding the text, making sure we're understanding it right, and just more specific questions next week. I so appreciate Brad, his heart to bring the text to life and to teach the text. I pray this was encouraging to you. You can find Brad again at walkingthetext.com and learn more about his ministry. You can check out that resource he mentioned in this episode, a really helpful guide to reading the text well, and it gives other resources to help you understand it as well. I'll put the link to that down in the notes below. As always, thanks for tuning in to the Bible and Life podcast, and we will talk again next week.